Hello, everyone. I am Carol Ha, Associate Curator of Contemporary Asian Art at the Freer and Sackler Galleries, the Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art. Welcome to the studio, our virtual contemporary art space, where we meet with artists from across Asia and learn more about their work. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Lauren Alexander and Ghalia Elsrakbi, also known as Foundland Collective. Begun in 2009 by South African Lauren Alexander and Syrian Ghalia Elsrakbi, and currently based between Amsterdam and Cairo, Foundland Collective uses art, design, writing, teaching, video making, and storytelling to explore underrepresented historical and political narratives. Often through extensive analyses of the content and concept of archives, in what has also become an increasingly fraught media world, the duo has reflected critically upon what it means to produce politically engaged work from their position as non-Western artists working between Europe and the Middle East. Among their numerous projects, Foundland Collective was awarded the Smithsonian Artist Research Fellowship in 2015 to conduct research on the NAF collection, considered the largest archive documenting Arab American history. The outcome of that research was presented as a video installation at the Centre Pompidou in Paris in 2017, and their short video, The New World, Episode 1, presented at the Rotterdam Film Festival in 2018. The duo have lectured and exhibited internationally from New York to Sharjah and many points in between. Lauren and Ghalia each will present aspects of their practice, including the New World and their current project. After their presentation, we'll have a brief discussion and then answer questions from the audience. So with that, I turn it over to the both of you. Thanks for being here this afternoon.
Thank you, Carol, for inviting us, and we are really happy to join you all today. I will start by introducing ourselves as a collective, and today we will go through two projects. I will take you through the first one, and then Lauren will take it over to the second one. So as Carol introduced us, we are a female collective, artistic collective called Foundland. Our collaboration started in 2009 after we completed our master's study at the Sandberg Institute in Amsterdam. As Foundland, we initiate projects that explore underrepresented political and historical narrative by working with archives. We use different methods, but through art, design, writing, and educational formats and storytelling, we try to critically reflect on those narratives and how to produce politically engaged work from our position as non-Western female artists working between those two worlds, between the West and the Middle East. In 2011, our attention turned to events related to the Arab Spring and its effects on the Arab region in specific and the world in large in general. At that time, we started working on creating our own archive to document what is happening, to research and study the role that images play in conflict times. We worked on many projects that required traveling and living in few cities, including Cairo in 2013, where we witnessed the large scale of migration of many Syrians to Egypt, and thus the emergence of few Syrian neighborhoods on the outskirts of the city. Our interest in observing and monitoring this phenomenon and its subsequent expansion of a large migration to Europe later on, which was combined with negative and positive reaction about how to deal with what many considered as major crisis, made us look for historical precedents. And this is how we got to know the Syrian neighborhood in New York known as Little Syria. Thousands of immigrants from Greater Syria what today's we know it as Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine, arrived to New York City in the late 19th century, many of whom were escaping religious persecution and poverty under the Ottoman Empire. Most of them settled in Little Syria, or the Syrian Quarter, the area around Washington Street from Battery Park to Rector Street, because of its proximity to the docks where many of the men could find jobs. So it is like the yellow neighborhood you see on the left. Most Syrian immigrants began as peddlers, but known for their entrepreneurial spirit, the neighborhood was full of Arab restaurants, coffee shops, pastry shops, goods merchants, and silk stores. Unfortunately, in the early 40s, the demolition phase of this neighborhood began with the construction of the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, causing many residents to move out of the area, and thus the disappearance of this rich and vibrant community. We met with many civic groups, individuals, and researchers interested in preserving what was left of this neighborhood and commemorating the role of this forgotten community in enriching Americans' cultural heritage. And here we learned about the existence of the Faris and Yamna Naf collection, which we have visited for 2 years in a row. This distinguished archive is considered one of the most important projects that documented the history of Arab American community, founded by Dr. Alexia Naf. You see there in the previous image. She was a Lebanese-born American, passionate collector, and a pioneer historian of Arab American culture and immigration history. Naf documented Arab immigration to the United States during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. She had driven throughout the state to collect oral history and family belongings for the collection, which she later donated to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. The collection contains more than 450 oral history, 2,000 photographs, and more than 500 artifacts. We had no clear idea of the archive contents when we decided to apply for this artistic fellowship at the Smithsonian and to apply for viewing the archive. We were surprised by the amount of information we found on this forgotten community. Unfortunately, the archive was not organized in a way that could be easily accessed in such short time. So many of the documents were categorized in family boxes. It was also in Arabic and needed translation. So we decided on our first visit to look through the largest possible quantity of boxes to return next year with a specific plan of what we wanted to research in more depth. Our attention was focused primarily on the cultural repertoire that emerged from this neighborhood. As this 2 examples, the literary arts magazine Al-Funun, founded by Nasib Arida in 1913, which was one of the first published magazine in Arabic, also was famous for publishing the work of the Pen League, or the Pen Association, to which Khalil Gibran, Amin Rehani, Mikhail Name, and other well-known writers of the diaspora belonged, in addition to translated international literary work that was also important at that time. Another example you see here on the right is Kawkab America, which started as a weekly newspaper, was the first Arabic language newspaper in North America, typeset by hand, published between 1892 and 1908. We also focused on researching a group of personalities and families that sparked our interests during our first visit, such as Adla and Amir Khaddaj, a musician couple from Mount Lebanon, both of whom worked as singers for the Palestinian radio station in Jerusalem in the 30s and lived there until they decided to migrate to the United States in 1947, 1 year before the Palestinian Nakba. Through that, we found, through our work in the archive, we found many personal documents, concerts, flyers, posters, letters, song lyrics, Through all this, we were able to trace the trail of this creative small family and decided that their story will be the first to feature in our work using the archive material in addition to other material we recorded ourselves during our journey tracking their story back. Our experience in the archive led us to realize the importance of reviving these forgotten stories and using them as source to create an alternative narrative of migrants' history. We started sharing what we found with our communities through informal gatherings in which we hosted many friends who are interested in the topic. We made many trips to track the first journey of Amr and Adla from Jerusalem to America through many cities such as Cairo and Alexandria. We translated the lyrics of Amr and Adla. They self-composed songs as we tried to find recordings of these songs, which was impossible. Later on, we worked closely with these amazing men, Hamdo, Maher, and Murhaf, group of Syrian musicians, newly asylum seekers in the Netherlands, who happened to be familiar with Zajal. It's a form of music performance widely spread in the area of mountain Lebanon, which Adel and Amr and Adla were really performing this kind of music across the states. The collaboration allowed us to reactivate the archival material by reinterpreting, performing, and recording Amr and Adla's music again. The results of all this was a group of artworks. The first is an installation that includes a short video narrating Amr and Adla's life, composed together with recorded clips from their songs, with a mural of a map representing their journey between the old and the new world. We exhibited this work in several exhibitions, including a show in Centre Pompidou in Paris, Sharjah Design Biennial, and the Rotterdam International Film Festival. I think we will show you now a short piece.
Sorry. مدينة الإسكندرية وعلى سفينة ساتونيا عبروا البحر والمحيط ب10 أيام لحتى وصلوا على أمريكا شارع كلينتون ببروكلين. عامر وعدلا ما كان معهم مصاري كتير، بس كان لهم مشجعين كتار يلي كانوا مؤمنين بموسيقتهم وأغانيهم الحلوة. أمريكا كانت المكان الجديد يلي فيه ريحة الوطن. تعود أيام الشتاء لزراع جبل.
This is a very short piece. I think you will be able to view the video, the complete video. We actually allow a short time preview. So the link will be actually placed on the chat later on. Another artwork was the New World time stacks. It's a series of glass and photographic layered collage which bring physical form to concepts narrated in the video. In this work, we emphasize on migration as an experience over time in a series of 4 layered towers, which contain archival and contemporary images and documents. By deconstructing and unifying memories, generational fragments, we show the continually fluid and nonlinear experience of Arab American identity. We have been also invited to participate in an artistic feminist festival called Tashwish, organized between the cities of Brussels and Cairo. And especially for our participation in this festival, we developed an audiovisual lecture performance focusing on female characters from the archive, such as Alexei Naf herself, Afifa Karam, a feminist writer and journalist known for her writing in early 20th centuries, empowering feminist movements and independence of women in the Middle East, and also other amazing women we met in the archive. That's it about this project. So I will give now the word to Lauren to talk about the second one.
All right, you can hear me, right? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk shortly about another project of ours, which also has to do with an intervention in an archive, but a completely different type of archive. And this project is called RealTime History. We started with this one in 2018. And in fact, we are still busy working on this project at the moment. So it's an ongoing research. To give you a little bit of background to this project, we were commissioned by a media arts festival to consider how fake news was playing out in relation to the Syrian conflict. This was in 2018. And while we were busy working on this, this very news story broke out that you see on these two images of a supposed chemical weapons attack, which had taken place in April 2018. What we began to see as the news broke about this particular event over the 8th and 9th of April, and what you see in this example from The Guardian and also from the CNN news, is that this very same video material, the very same fragment, was being used to narrate this particular story. Then a couple of days later, actually on the 14th of April, there was an emergency UN Security Council meeting called in New York. And based probably on that very same video evidence and image material, actually what happened was that there was a coalition between the Western countries, and based on that evidence, they decided to send retaliation attacks back to the Assad regime, just a couple of days after that initial attack had taken place. Then if we fast forward a couple of months forward, so to July of 2018, what we found out about was that there was actually an investigation taking place on the ground in Syria, in Douma, by the OPCW. And the OPCW is actually the only mandated organization or watchdog of chemical weapons attacks globally. They had done this investigation on the ground and had found actually no conclusive evidence of the fact that a chemical weapons attack had taken place. So for us, this was pretty alarming to see that throughout Western media, images had been video material had been used to narrate a supposed chemical weapon attack, which then was put to question if that had actually taken place at all. And in fact, we still don't know, and it is still a controversy till this day. What you see here is an overview of the video material that we decided to look into because we found it important to try and look back at all the video material that could have possibly been linked and being made by citizen journalists on the ground at that moment in time to just see what was out there. We turned to the work of the Syrian Archive, so that is syrianarchive.org, and they are a group, they're based in Berlin, and they maintain a website and an archive called the Syrian Archive, where they collect content and make it publicly available for journalists, human rights defenders, lawyers, reporters, and for accountability purposes. So we used actually their archive as a starting point. After a broad sweep of all of the video material related to this particular attack, we started to collate and categorize all of our findings. And a vast collection of videos is what we actually managed to find, about 150 in total. The content of these was very graphic, of course, And at the same time, we found it very valuable to try and distinguish what type of testimonies and what type of documentation was existing in the archive to narrate these particular events. You can imagine hospital documentation and witnesses on the ground who had seen the events, but then there was no actual material evidence of that existing. So that was just a visual overview of what we were finding, but also we gathered everything in this digital database, or the mega spreadsheet, in which we gave attention in this spreadsheet in particular to distribution, production, and translation. So how many times was this video shared? Who made this video? And what was all the metadata connected to this video? What we eventually ended up with was a 22-minute video, which we called RealTime History, which is actually just the first iteration of this research project. And we call it RealTime History because it basically brings together 3 different videos, which we found particularly interesting, and replays them in real time. We showed this for the first time in September 2018, and at that moment we had just heard about the OPCW report and everything, and so we found it important, to just create this first iteration of real-time history, which we called Case Study Stripy Shirt, and it revolves around this man, which you see here in number 1, video 1, Yasser Aldamani, who is a citizen journalist, and he was then based in Duma, and he was wearing a stripy shirt throughout every single video which he recorded. So that's also why we actually initially spotted these 3 videos in particular. What these 3 videos also do is illustrate how one particular fragment of video evidence is used to tell an oppositional story, depending on who is, of course, telling that story. Okay, just to take you very briefly through video 1, here is Yasser Aldamani, and this is a short video fragment where he is basically recording just post-attack. There had just been supposedly a chemical attack, and he's recording himself, showcasing or showing the audience or the viewer the evidence behind him. Then there is video 2, and video 2 is actually video 1 and 2 edited together. And here we see also a hospital scene. So one would assume that the victims of this particular chemical attack are being treated in this hospital. Then what we see in the 3rd video, which is made for Russia Today, is the same videos which we see in video 2, but they are being watched on a laptop. They are being watched by 2 doctors who were supposedly in the hospital, and they completely denounced the attack. So in this way, with these 3 fragments, we get a full overview of how this video travels, but also how its story can be completely turned upside down or used to tell an opposing narrative. Now we're going to look very shortly at a clip, which is actually this scene that you see behind you, and you can get a brief idea of how we dealt with the video material. So on the right-hand side, we are framing certain parts of the video. We are kind of like framing them so that you can have a closer look. Then on the left-hand side, Ghalia and I are actually having a dialogue about the material that we're seeing. The analysis of the material in a publication that we show together with the video, you can see here. So here again, you see the red video, which is indicated at the top, and how it travels through video 2, and then is also again shown in video 3. So we showed actually this video together with a publication, which we also found quite an interesting way to let the viewer actually at their own pace and in a step-by-step way look through as it will be the storyboard of the videos. And in this way also we were able to indicate different issues of editing and show different ways in which the videos had been manipulated or narrated. As I said, we are actually still working on this now. And what we have since been doing, actually since last year, we look back at this whole case and realize that in fact it is still very much in question, and a lot of controversy is still going on surrounding this very story. So what we decided to do as an initial exercise is to map out all the different connected organizations, governments, reporters, academics, human rights organizations. Many of them are not actually in Syria, of course, that it actually forms an international network of many different actors being involved. This is a really interesting project that we're just sort of embarking on now, and trying to really also still formulate. We're working on the new iteration of real-time history that will also go more into the afterlife of the digital video archives and how they can assist in narrating the future of evidence related to conflict in particular. So this is the latest project that we've been working on, and also maybe connects nicely to the work that we've done previously with archives. So happy to look at maybe some questions from the audience, or we can have a discussion about those with Carol. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren and Ghalia. That was, I know it's just a glimpse of the extensive amount of research that both of you do into the respective archives and others. What of course strikes me in looking at these two particular projects is that the content is quite different, right? There's a sort of more analog archive that you are researching, over 200 boxes of photographs and letters and accounts, compared with the vast, one could say unfathomable archive of digital media out there. Which leads me, there are many questions in there, but it leads me to my first one, which is, can you talk a little bit about the choices that you make for manifesting these different aspects of the project, like your decisions for installations and exhibitions, or how do you bring form to the questions that you're seeking to answer or exploring in your research?
Yeah, a good one. I think like in real-time history, it was quite important for us to really play with and kind of analyze the video as the form. So really looking at more of the cinematic and aspects of storytelling actually inside those videos. So for us, I guess like the kind of video and deconstruction of video, framing of video, trying to look at the issues of time and how video plays and how one understands video over time. All these things are really interesting to work on with real-time history in particular. But yeah, I think the aspect of dialogue in real-time history was also really important for us to bring our own positioning and our own voice into that. And in fact, it ended up being such a complicated exercise to be able to, with English text, to be able to translate and interpret the material from our own perspective at the same time. So even within, I mean, I know you're speaking more broadly towards like exhibition making and how do we make our choices, our artistic choices, but even within the video itself, I think it becomes quite a complex exercise, especially with real-time history.
Mm-hmm. I think in the new world, it was also important to include the archival material as it is. That was also kind of a long discussion we had, how to include this material, how to reinterpret this material. And then you see, like, if you see the whole movie, like they were recording of us, like stipulating the photographs on top of each other as like exactly how you view it in the archive itself. So the experience of going through this material and trying to puzzle between all these kind of documents and trying to trace actually a specific story or specific life journey of someone, of a character, it was really kind of important for us. But also we were also kind of very content driven. So the time stacks projects with those kind of layered photograph was completely based on content of correspondence letters between generations, between Amir and his father in Lebanon, but also between Amir and his son, who's actually was born in the United States, and having this kind of identity or kind of clash between generations about what is actually being Arab living in the United States back then. So we really spent time reading and being influenced by those characters. Like we lived with them. This is why we always say we met those people in the archive, because they were so vivid and it's like you're meeting someone you know, knowing that they died a long time ago, but it's really kind of important experience. And also reactivating the archive, that was also something we discussed a lot. How to not just like show the archival material, but how do you reactivate it, how you make it, how you contextualize it in nowadays. So this is why the collaboration with the musicians, with the newly migrants musician, to reconnect again with the material and to reinterpret this music again and to perform it again, that was completely kind of a new work for us, you know, to use this archive to create experiences and platform for people to meet and to create something new.
I think that's what, especially for the new world, it's quite palpable that you are telling a story, but you're also reconnecting a very human element to what are dry documents or sort of file folders of information. So you sort of restitch in a way all of this material, which brings me to another question I had about Lauren, you mentioned the SyriaArchive.org, and it makes me think of the number of archives, certainly in different parts of the Middle East, that are media-based, that are digital media or being turned into or uploaded as digital media. But then in some cases, in some key cases, must exist outside of the primary country. So in thinking of that and in thinking of the NAF archive here, how do you make your choices? Because you're going to commit a lot of time and energy to a particular resource. What drives your decisions, your selection process in choosing the archive, in deciding how you build what you called at one point a counter archive?
Yeah, I mean, I think our version of our interpretation of a counter archive is different, or takes on different forms throughout the different projects. And I think for RealTime History until now, we have investigated the counter archive as more a way of reading the material. So a way of kind of, promoting a kind of slow reading or an alternative reading of material, which we have more or less all seen before. So it becomes part of like a collective interpretation, or we connect it with certain media events. So Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that many of the archives exist outside of the country, and that's also really interesting. It's something we're just diving into it now, and it's a whole world of kind of the potential of these archives in providing evidence for court cases, for legal court cases, and these kind of things. So we really are discovering how many archives globally are forming a very important part of this transformative period post-conflict. And it is very important that these archives exist, even though something like the Syrian archive is quite marginal in a sense and doesn't have that much funding. And also they require so much maintenance, all of these archives, and kind of upkeep, that is, of course, the Smithsonian knows all about that. But for these small organizations, it really is such a huge issue. So I think what drives us in terms of like which ones we choose. I mean, now we are kind of making lists and trying to inventorize like how do these archives work, and we're trying to think about how our intervention, which is very small at this point, is just our first iteration of looking into how to watch the material, really how we could possibly contribute to this field, because I think there is a lot of work done on collecting material, especially with the Syrian Archive and many organizations of the like, of collecting material and maintaining it, or kind of struggling to maintain it. But then the work that's being done is really geared towards building legal cases, and also possibly for other reasons as well, for governments and so on. But I think that artists have quite an interesting role to play here. In terms of kind of also picking up on those details that are not maybe, within the legal framework or so on, like kind of looking at this material from a slightly different perspective. So I think, our choice is, I mean, I don't know, maybe Ghalia has a different idea about this, I don't know. But I think it's a kind of the idea of marginal archives, and how can we as artists, or with our gaze, or our interest in cinema, our interest in kind of reading material and analyzing media material, how can we contribute?
What to add? Well, in this project in particular, it was a kind of a natural choice to go with the Syrian Archive, because they had the material that we were looking at, or we wanted to look at, like concerning this specific event, because we were looking at specific events. Now we are actually expanding the research, and now we are actually asking a bigger question and a broader questions about the future of those archives in general, the future of this material, what is going to happen. We are asking question about the verification process. We are asking question about the production of this material. Who is funding the production of this material? Who's making the material? What are the artistic decisions that those makers make while making this material, taking into consideration that this material will be used in court? So like extra dramatizing, or using specific effects or editing, this also will influence how you interpret the material. So we are asking, regardless, or not so much focusing on specific events, which I think it will be more difficult because it's not easy to compare, but more like asking question from our expertise as image makers and interested in images, how we look at those images and what we think is happening. So we are now looking at we are trying to map many of these existing archives, not only related to the Syrian case, but also to other cases. We are planning to interview them to see to understand their methodology, their protocol, also how they finance themselves, the other agents or corporation that they collaborate with, what kind of requests they are getting. So all these kind of questions about this material. And later on, what's the future of it? What if the material is not verified, for example? Do they store it? Not? Who's making those decisions? Because in the end, what we actually witnessed in the real-time history case, that just a piece of video, really insignificant video, like actually made it to the UN, and then a political decision was made and they affected all of us. So in a way that there is a kind of a significant ramification of these images that we don't really grasp yet, and we are not really understanding at the moment, because it's as you said, it's really going so fast that we don't even.
It's going fast, but it's interesting, all of the in thinking of the different circumstances surrounding these items, if you will, and the accumulation of them. So, for example, technological capacity in different areas, the time it takes to upload, the different restrictions for different citizen journalists, and as you say, the future, these still require a great deal of physical resource, servers, for example. So there are all of these variables across this really complicated landscape of archives. So what I find interesting is the way that you make us slow down, as you said, and sort of pick apart images. You mentioned that real time, for instance, is being, and that approach is perhaps being picked up by other agencies and other organizations, which leads me to a question about reception. You talk about artists working in two different contexts. Can you speak a little bit about the exhibition of your works in different contexts, or the presentation of your work, and the kind of differences or similarities in reception in those, whether you're showing in the Middle East or in Europe or in the States?
Yeah, this is a good question. We are always, I think we also need to consider this difference many times, because the audience is really different. And for example, audiences in the Middle East or viewers in the Middle East, they're really sensitive or critical towards specific material, especially because it concerns them directly. So their interpretation of the work is usually different, more intense discussion, which is good. Like, we like it, and I think it's a kind of a privilege for us to be able to exhibit in those kind of different worlds, because also we consider ourselves kind of a bridge between all this, and I think it was really amazing, because at the time that we started working at the Alex Yanaf collection, for example, not so many people knew about it, and now so many actually podcasts and projects emerging in the Middle East are focusing on this kind of bringing or reviving more stories about Arab American history, and using actually the archival material to as a kind of a source of visual and inspirational stories to future generation to talk about it. So I think we are happy to be part of this movement that using the archives to reconnect again with our own history. As someone who grew up in the Middle East, I didn't know so much about Arab American, and even many of the people I met in the archive were coming from my country, but I didn't know more. So somehow, in the after the 40s and after the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, so many things shifted, and a lot of connections were broken between those two worlds. So I didn't know about so many things were happening. So I was also, as a normal person, not just as an artist or a researcher, I was really happy to reconnect again with this material. So, and we experienced also so many enthusiasm of people here knowing about it, and also understanding. And I think now you see in the Middle East, I just wanted to go back to your point about like archives in the Middle East were usually organized or maintained by the states. And now you see many individual initiatives of starting and establishing personal archives and make it public online. So you have individual artists. I just met yesterday like a great friend who is starting a really interesting archive about the art movement in Egypt in the 20th century. He have like a great collection of books, published work, and documentation of exhibitions that happens from late 20s till now, and he's doing this on a as a personal effort, and he make it accessible through a website and online for everybody to share and to research if they want. So I think there is a collective awareness about the importance of archive, about a collective awareness that having access to the archive and being able to control the narrative somehow, and we need to reclaim control of our narrative. So this is what I can say about archives here in general.
Just a thought on what you just said, though. It's interesting that, although institutional archives come with their baggage, there are filters, there are choices being made, there are certain positions perhaps from which institutional archives can speak. But it also brings the possibility of preservation. So what strikes me is that there is this collective awareness and all of this wonderful material, and we individually have the means to make that material available publicly. But their longevity is what I wonder about. And so it's interesting to think about both of you, for example, as artists, kind of going through some of this material, tip of the iceberg, but being able to look at this material in a way, excavate it, pull it apart, put it under a microscope. So it's sort of fascinating the way you approach an image or a single clip of video and find out how many layers there are actually in it, and maybe even how, in a sense, promiscuous it can be. You showed us that, I guess, what is the first iteration of real-time history? What is next? What directions do you see yourself going in? Have you determined that yet? Or what's next for real-time history?
I think we're giving it some time to dive into the field a bit. I mean, in fact, we've been today at a conference about open source databases, and it gets very nerdy and very quickly. So yeah, I think we're diving into that field. And I mean, the plan was that we wanted to do a series of interviews with people who we found really that are doing important work in the field, but also to do an interview in such a way that it brings it to an artistic audience, or that we can draw kind of lessons from that for our own field, in a sense, or think about, again, how we can connect to that as artists, designers. So yeah, that's the process we're in right now, is meeting people and planning our interview series. And we're also working together with another fabulous video maker, Hannah Ruhlman, and we expand our collective a little bit for a while, and so yeah, we're just enjoying having that conversations and kind of gathering research at this point. Probably lockdown is good for that. So that's pretty much where it is now. But we hope to wrap it up kind of in summertime, that we can launch our website with the interviews or whatever it will be. Not sure yet.
Actually, that's what I was going to ask you next was, it's been a year of severely altered ways and practices. And the both of you have not, while you've been quite active in your sort of respective places, teaching and continuing to work digitally, do you feel that this past year has sort of significantly impacted the way you've thought conceptually about your work? Or do you feel I ask this now because it's been a whole year. Maybe if we were in the first month, I wouldn't have thought of this as much. But how do you feel the impact of having to alter your practice practically over the last year?
I think for us, it's been like a little bit of a pause where we were in this mode of, producing exhibitions quite a bit. So during 2018, also 19, we were running around a lot, flying around a lot, producing new work for exhibitions and setting up exhibitions and thinking about production of exhibitions and presentations in different places. And now, of course, somehow presentations exist still as we do them now, which is great. They also get documented in a better way, which is also nice. Mm-hmm. But I definitely think that kind of pace of just churning out kind of more and more work has slowed down. So I think that it's given us quite a unique opportunity to reflect on the content and also on our position, I think, to the content. So in that sense, maybe it's quite good, although, of course, we do miss meeting each other and seeing each other in real. And that's a real downer, honestly, because we were doing all these residency periods and the kind of energy of being together, I think, is also really important. So good things, but also not such good things. But yeah, it's been okay. We're really busy teaching anyway, so that's probably doubled in workload. So
yeah, that is, it does sort of come back to the thought that I shared at the beginning of this discussion period, is that physical aspect. Your earlier installations around the table, or that there was this physical aspect, and now sort of necessarily, but also fundamentally, is more about this digital interaction with a digital media. So it's interesting to feel that shift in your work, at least for now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, in terms of our relation, because we live in different cities, so we were used to it. But this was a kind of a unique situation for us. People always question how you do it, how do you communicate, how do you produce work. So in terms of, in the beginning, it was like really not new for us, because this is how we used to communicate for a long time. But yes, we noticed that we had periods, we plan a period in the year where we see each other, and when we, sorry for the sound, where we like meet in physical, and then we brainstorm and create new ideas. And this is where we discuss actually those ideas. So that is now is gone. We just met once this year, I think, which was a kind of also special lockdown camp. But yeah, considering the circumstances, I think we are doing fine. It was okay. We also applied for funding, which we never had time to do, and we had last year. So that was great, and we got funding. So usually, like all those kind of difficult things or part of our work that we don't like, and we keep shifting back, we now had more room to do it, which is great. Yeah.
So my last question, as I hear the street noises behind you, just a simple, what has life been like in Cairo and Amsterdam? Improving, I hope.
Well, Cairo now is business as usual. So it's really normal. People try to wear masks and keep distance. That's it. Well, I'm still teaching online till now, so I didn't go back to school since a year. But we are starting a hybrid model in begin March, so we will see. Yeah, but no hard lockdown. It's normal. Yeah.
Yeah. What to say? I mean, I've been in South Africa. I'm very happy I got to be there with my family for a couple of events. So that was fantastic. But back in Amsterdam, it's very much locked down. We can go to the hairdresser as of next week. So that is the one luxury that everybody's looking forward to. But otherwise, everything is very much Yeah, much slower. I think a lot of artist friends are struggling a bit to find their way, and I think students are very frustrated. And luckily the weather is a bit better now, I have to say, miraculously. So,
that's great. Well, thanks both of you for sharing your thoughts and your really provocative work in many ways. It raises a lot of interesting questions about how we look and what we look at and what we ingest as information. Always a necessary critical reminder, critical pause these days. I also wanted to thank the audience for joining us today, and to our public programs team, Grace Murray, Yin-Ying Cheng, and Kara Nolan, without whom this Zoom program would not have been possible. As always, and also to Mary Mulcahy of our curatorial department for her help with this. Please do stay in touch. As you've seen in the chat, there are links to Foundland Collective's work so that you can learn more about their work. There's also a link to the studio, and I invite everyone to please join us again on March 16th, where we will have a program featuring Tehran-based Nazgul Ansarinia. So with that, I wish you both good health and safety and success, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.